It is round 2 of the sophomore scrutiny series. We are going to be diving into 5 of the best sophomore running backs and what you should be doing with them in Dynasty. Stick around. Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Sanctuary. That is right. We are continuing the sophomore scrutiny series and we are going to venture on over to the running back position. I'm joined by a phenomenal guest. You will probably know him for his work over at DLF, but it is, of course, Matt Price. Matt, how are you doing?
Doing well, man. Every time I come on this show, I feel like we class it up a little bit. It's just there's something about your accents just very pleasurable to listen to your cadence, Rich. So yeah, happy to be back. Always happy to chat football with you over here at the Sanctuary.
Well, I don't really know what to say there. It's not often that someone comes on and gives me a compliment straight off the bat. So yeah,
I feel like I should be wearing a tie or something.
The top hat, tails. Go the full shebang.
That's right. That's right.
Perfect. Well, that is right. As I said, we are going to be diving into some sophomore running backs. Now, Matt, before we go into talk about individuals, this was kind of billed as the running back class to, save Dynasty football running backs, essentially. A year on, how do you feel about the class as a whole? Did it live up to the billing, or do you think it kind of, as a whole, slightly disappointed?
I really think it did. I mean, I don't know. I don't think everybody has their rankings like this, but for me, 3 of the top 4 running backs in Dynasty Fantasy Football right now are from this 2023 class.
Oh, wow.
Right? For me, it's Bijan, it's Jahmyr Gibbs, it's Devon Achane. I think some people probably have Achane down farther in their list, but for me, it's Robinson, Hall, Gibbs, and Achane at the top, as the top 4 backs in Dynasty right now. And really, those are the only 4 that I really want to acquire, like spend anything to acquire, either whether it's in a startup or through trades or anything like that. Like pretty much everybody else, it just feels like, I don't know. It just feels like their value isn't as secure, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I've got a show coming up in a couple of weeks where we're going to dive into the running back position, I guess, from a strategic sense, where we're talking, because it feels like we're approaching the point of almost it tipping too far. Like nobody in Dynasty values running backs. So at some point, running backs are going to become valuable, if that makes sense. I don't know if we're quite there yet, but certainly it feels like, as you said, there's like 4 guys I feel comfortable placing any sort of value in, and the rest I'm just attacking with volume at the position.
Exactly.
Well, let's dive in with the top. The potential franchise-changing superstar, top 10 pick in the NFL draft, Bijan Robinson, didn't quite live up to the hype. I think a lot of people are willing to try and blame Arthur Smith, but RB9 in 2023 had decent volume, but wasn't uber efficient on the touches that he did see. What do you make of Bijan's season last year?
I mean, it was disappointing from the fact that nobody can live up to the hype that we put on Bijan Robinson. He was the running back at one in Dynasty, this from his sophomore season in college. Like at that point, people were already talking about him as the Dynasty, and we couldn't even have access to him for another 2 years, right? So, nobody could live up to that. And in that system, with that quarterback, with that offensive line, with the struggles that team had all over the offense, like I don't think we can put too much on him. You have your 214 attempts. I mean, that's pretty solid. You'd like to see a back drafted that highly get up into that 250 range from a carry standpoint, but we have to remember that the previous season Tyler Algier ran for 1,000 yards, so he's a very good back. There's no reason to take that high draft capital that you invested in Bijan Robinson necessarily and overwork him, at least in his freshman season in the NFL, right? So if you have that reliable back that can kind of spell him, and from some metrics, I would say that Algier was maybe even more efficient than Bijan at the goal line. So that might crowd into year 2 here. But I think we've seen that Raheem Morris there's several quotes out there of saying, they're going to give Bijan basically everything he can handle. So we'll see if he gets to that 250 to 300 kind of touch range as a runner. And then as on the receptions, I mean, 58 receptions is nothing to sneeze about, right? Like he had more receptions than Jahmyr Gibbs, who's the receiving back. So I don't think we can be too upset with it. We didn't get the RB1 finish, the RB1 overall finish, like, maybe we had hoped in year 1. But there's nothing but upside, I think, for Bijan at this point.
Yeah, I think, the overall numbers are solid, perhaps slightly underwhelming. I think that for me, though, from a I guess, a talent film perspective, he more than flashed. I mean, perhaps I
Yeah.
overvalue it slightly because it was the one time I got to see him over here last year. But that game against Jacksonville, there was the screen pass that he caught, went to the sideline and made a guy just completely whiff in space. There was the touchdown where he sort of caught the ball on his bum almost, and then made a guy miss in the hole, and then walked in for a touchdown. And I just think, I don't know if there's any other player in the league that can make those two places back to back and then go and carry the ball between
No.
the tackles 10 times. Like,
y-
he's a one of
Yeah.
one, and he's so unique in terms of his usage.
Yeah. That, I forget the overhead cam of that one. I think it was one of the plays you were talking about there, where he caught the ball and just like made the subtlest of moves, and that guy just jumped right past him. Like, when you see that kind of stuff, I mean, we're talking about plays that only a handful of running backs. I'm not saying he's the only one that could do that. We've seen CMC do that a number of times. I think Gibbs can do that in certain scenarios. Achane has a little bit different skill set, but just the combination of the ability to be that between the tackles back and be an elite receiver, and have the tackle evasion skills that he has at his size, and the speed that he has at his size is just, I mean, there's, and the age, 22 years old, like the combination of all of those things coming into confluence with this new offense that presumably wants to feed him as much as possible, especially with Kirk Cousins coming off that ACL injury, protect him a little bit from that regard. Then I mean, there's nobody else there. I do see sometimes CMC go ahead of him in mock drafts, startup mock drafts, and things like that, and you can understand that, like, from a 2024 perspective, but like after that, I mean, I think CMC is going to age gracefully. I think he's going to, even when he is in his post age 30 season, he's still going to be very useful as a pass catcher. But like, to take the 6-year discount on Bijan, like, that's like, it's not even a question for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, Bijan's in a conversation with Breece Hall RB1, and those are the only two players that, for me, I would be considering there.
Yeah.
I think the underrated thing, you mentioned the new regime, the new offensive coordinator. Hopefully that's going to bring some increased interesting usage in terms of how they're aligning him, perhaps some different schemes and things like that. The best thing, though, is that the Falcons have got a fantastic offensive line, but the underrated thing, they're keeping the offensive line coach. I think it's a phenomenal thing for Zach Robinson to be keeping Dwayne Ledford in place. That Falcons offensive line is very good, and Dwayne Ledford, you keep them in place. I think that's genius, and I think that's a really smart move for a first-time offensive coordinator, where you're going to keep one of the league's best offensive line coaches who's going to take charge of the run game, and then Zach Robinson can just tweak it and add all the bells and whistles, and hopefully kind of the sky's the limit. So the price then, Matt, I know we talked about, you said, correct me if I'm wrong, he's your RB1 in Dynasty right now?
Yeah.
So these are prices from the DLF trade calculator. So apparently in a 1QB league, we should be paying 2 firsts and 2 seconds for Bijan. Is that a price you can be comfortable paying?
I mean, it's a lot, but if it's like, if it's your final piece and you want to invest in running backs, I would certainly rather pay that price than, say, 2 firsts for Jonathan Taylor. Like, if you want to add on a couple seconds, or it's hard to find players in fantasy football outside of superflex formats that I feel comfortable playing basically the equivalent of 3 firsts for. But man, it's just really hard to argue with that. I think more likely I would be trying to offer a player a first and a second, something like that. Like, I don't know if I would go in straight away with 2 firsts. And from the flip side, if I was trading away Bijan Robinson, those are the kind of players that I think I want some kind of confirmed production back with. Like, I don't want just picks.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what I mean? Like, give me back a receiver and a first, like a receiver in the top 12 to 15 that I really like, and a first round pick, something like that. I don't really want 4 assets that are unpredictable if my goal is to not eventually move them for something else. And if you're not going to move them for wide receiver production in a 1 quarterback league, you might as well just hold on to Bijan at that point, because where are you pivoting to if you're going to use that capital that you're going to get for Bijan to pivot to something else? You might as well just move him for that receiver and the extra capital on top of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, Bijan he's untouchable in terms of trading for him. Like, I'm just never going to be comfortable paying the price that you're going to need to pay to go and acquire him,
right?
Because anytime you're talking 2 firsts for a player, unless it's Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, maybe someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown, I'm just walking away. Like I just can't mortgage my future for one player, particularly at a position like running back. So yeah, I think that's maybe you can get that. It feels a bit rich, but there's no way I can touch that price to go and pay for him. And I think I'm just the kind of person that rather than going out and acquire Bijan, I'd rather send a first for Kyron Williams and 2 seconds for Ramondre Stevenson and cobble together those two rather than having Bijan kind of thing.
Yeah, and we have to. We've said this for years now. You have to play this position. Maybe outside of those 4 names that we mentioned, you have to play this position on a year-to-year basis. But as soon as you pay that 2 first, 2 second price, Bijan, God forbid, goes down in week 3. Immediately that he becomes the running back. 4 or 5 in Dynasty, and that's still very valuable, but it's not the same level that you're getting. I do wonder, would you, if you are, as I assume most of us are in the competitive space, or we're very wide receiver draft heavy, especially in a 1 quarterback league, would you, if you were very strong at wide receiver, like every pick you've made has just hit, you have 6 or 7 deep that you feel really good at wide receiver, would you consider pivoting one of those top guys if you had a Chase, a Jefferson, a Lamb, maybe an Amon-Ra St. Brown? I don't know how far the list you would need to go, but at that point, would you consider pivoting from the wide receiver to Bijan if you were strong and you could get some kind of like one-for-one deal where you wouldn't have to give up any extra capital?
No, not for those top guys. I think for me to make a 1-for-1, I'm just pulling up my trade values now. So for me, I've got Bijan worth exactly the same as Chris Olave, Tyreek Hill, worth a little bit more than Drake London,
and that's never getting
Jalen
done.
Waddle. So yeah, I just, as I said, I think rosters where I've got Bijan, I'm holding him if I'm a contender. Rosters where I don't have Bijan, I'm probably just never going to pay the price to go and acquire him because I just don't value the running back position that highly. Where there's no way I could send Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, someone like that for him, even if I'm an elite contender and I see that running back as my one hole on my roster. I still can't do it. I'd rather go and, as I said earlier, go and buy 2 cheaper guys that I think can give me similar production.
Totally. You take 2 shots instead of 1 shot, and you may not get the same level of production on a week-to-week basis, but you're protecting your future a little bit there. And like you said, if you value them at the same price as, around Chris Olave level, like that deal is never getting done, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But we will move on to the second running back drafted. Again, a high first round pick. He finished as the RB10 in 2023, whilst sharing a backfield with David Montgomery. Were you expecting a little bit more from Gibbs in the passing game, or do you think this was about what we could expect from a rookie Jahmyr Gibbs?
Yeah, I mean, he eclipsed that 50 number, but I was expecting something more like 60 to 70, maybe getting close to that league leader in running back receptions, up there with guys like Christian McCaffrey. But it just didn't happen because, we forgot that David Montgomery is also a very good running back in his own right. And I do think that there is plenty of evidence to suggest that Gibbs is going to have an increased role in all aspects of the offense. But we have to remember this is a guy who's just over 200 pounds, right? So they're gonna want to keep him fresh, I would guess. So like, don't buy into this coach speak too much. That said, I would expect him to at least get 50 this year, if not head up into that 60 to 70 range. And I mean, outside of Bijan, like he offers the most kind of upside, I would say. At least I would say the most safe upside in terms of the secureness of his role, other than Bijan to me, even a little bit over a guy like Breece Hall.
Yeah, I think the receiving usage, as you said, I was probably a little bit disappointed in terms of the raw numbers. But I don't think anyone really expected Sam Laporta to come in and command the volume of targets that he did.
Yes.
And when you're talking, Amon-Ra St. Brown saw 160 plus last year, I wouldn't be shocked to see that go north of 10 per game and him see kind of maybe 180, something like that. I think Sam Laporta is going to be in that 120 plus range. And there's only so many targets to go around an NFL offense. And I just don't know if there's a world where with St. Brown, with Laporta, you can have a third 100 target plus receiver in that offense. I think they spread it around enough. So maybe that's my slight concern about Gibbs. I've got him he's my RB3 behind Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson, but it is very, very close between the three. I just think that the fact that he's going to split work, we're going to see him potentially lose some of those high value touches in and around the goal line. It does concern me slightly.
Yeah, I mean, it's no doubt that Montgomery is the better, better option if you just need to get 1 yard in a cloud of dust and cross the goal line, right? And then the other concern is if I'm not sure I really buy into this as much as I really want to like Jameson Williams this year, finally having a full off season without any distractions, presumably like that his target volume is going to increase. But like you said, with St. Brown and Laporta there, and I mean, I think Gibbs is always going to be the third target getter in that offense. I don't think that Jameson Williams is really going to affect that much. You think he's always going to be the fourth at best?
Yeah, this is not a Jameson Williams fan zone, so yeah, I'm not convinced there's going to be anything coming from there. But in terms of price, so similar in price to Bijan Robinson.
Yeah,
we talked about him. He's in that tier with with Bijan. Would you take the discount slightly and go and buy Jahmyr Gibbs if you were looking to pay up for one of those elite running backs?
I think I would pay. I think I would probably, if I was a strong contender and I had, I don't know, some other random, like I moved another running back or wide receiver, maybe a quarterback in a super flex league, and picked up an extra first from a middle of the road kind of team. I might pay my late first and a mid first for Gibbs. I think adding on the extra second is kind of unnecessary. But that 2 first range, I think I'm probably comfortable with.
Yeah,
for Gibbs and for Robinson, of course.
And would you, if you had Bijan, would you take Jahmyr Gibbs in a second to tear down?
No. I would take Jahmyr Gibbs in a first, but I don't think I would do it for a second. I guess that's kind of obvious, right? Most people would probably do that, but yeah, I don't think I would do it for a second.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where if it was another player that was helping me, maybe I'm having a conversation about it. But if it's a second, it's
like a Gibbs. If like a Gibbs and a T Higgins or something,
Yeah, but realistically, if I'm looking to move running back, I'm wanting to be a contender. If I'm a contender, what's the second doing for me? Realistically at this time of year, the draft's gone. So do I really want the asset that's going to sit there? Yeah, maybe I can use it in season to go and buy a veteran that helps me, but it's not really moving the needle enough to do it. So I'd much rather just hold Bijan. Before we move on to our next running back, though, we are closing in on 2,500 subscribers. If you haven't yet clicked the subscribe button, go ahead and do it now. We've got so much more content coming your way. I guess the biggest boom bust guy, like stretches where it felt like he broke fantasy last year, stretches where it felt like he couldn't score any points. Devon Achane finished overall as the RB24, but I think because of the highs, that felt like that number should probably be a little bit higher when we're talking about his season last year. Do you think he can, I guess, become a consistent fantasy producer, or do you think we're always going to end up with that boom bust nature?
I do think there's going to be boom bust games, but I think we'll have some kind of level of consistency. I don't know if you saw the Travis Wingfield report from Miami Dolphins camp. He's one of their top beat writers. Just going to read a little bit out of his quote. My God, Devon Achane is going to have a monster year. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere. This guy is doing so much with his game, his uses in the passing game, how he circled himself, circled that as something he could improve in his game and be a more dynamic piece of this offense. This might be the next CMC in terms of overall versatility and general usage. He's being used in the pass game, the run game. He's a big play waiting to happen. He's doing things that I've never seen before, which is something that I said about when I watched Tyreek Hill when he first came to Miami into practices. So he's putting him up there with impact in terms of Tyreek Hill. Now this is a beat writer, it's a fluff piece, all that kind of stuff. But I just think that they're gonna find ways to get him more involved. We saw this guy already have a 50-point fantasy day on limited touches. He's shown that he can be very efficient on his touches. So even if he's in the 12 to 15 range, touch range again this season, but manages to put together a completely healthy season. I mean, I just think he's as likely to finish in the top 6 running backs as anybody. And if he does get that increased workload, increased volume, maybe Raheem Mostert falls off a little bit. Maybe Jalen Wright isn't ready, isn't quite as involved, isn't getting the same massive holes that was open for him at Tennessee. Then Achane's workload could certainly increase. So I'm on the extreme optimism side of Achane. As I said, I have him as my running back 4 just after Breece Hall, and one of the 4 running backs that I'm looking to acquire if I'm looking to acquire a running back.
Yeah, I mean that's some big hype there, some big expectations. I guess for me, I'd caveat that quote by saying I get that he's here, there, he's everywhere, he looks phenomenal, but that was probably from a non-contact OTA session.
Of course.
And I think that's the thing to kind of keep in mind here is, look, the talent, the explosion, the ability to score from anywhere on the field was never in question when Achane was coming out as a prospect.
Of course.
The one question was, can he carry a workload? And if we didn't see that answered last year because he only played in 11 games and picked up 2 injuries through the season. So that's going to be my concern. I think, if you're one of those kind of fringe contenders, maybe you consider yourself sort of the 3rd or 4th best team and you need things to go right for you to win a title, I think Achane's absolutely the kind of player that you should be going out to try and acquire, because I think he's got the potential to completely win you a league. And if, he gets injured, if it doesn't work out, you probably weren't going to win the league anyway, so there's nothing lost. If you're a true contender and you're looking to, for safety, I guess, because you've got an elite roster, I think he's a massive risk, and he definitely makes me nervous. I quite like the price. RB9 in ADP. You can see the price quoted on the screen there. First 2 seconds. That's a significant step down from those top 2 guys that we talked about. I just think I really like him if he's my RB2. And I can kind of roll with the boom bust and maybe not have to, accept that I might miss him 6-7 games a season. If he's my RB1 and I'm sort of building around him, it makes me a little bit more nervous.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Like, from a consistency standpoint, you want to make sure you're getting the touches every single week. I guess my counterpoint would be, like, in terms of situation, and I guess really the player's strengths too, what really is the difference between he and Jahmyr Gibbs? 5 to 10 pounds, maybe. He has, I guess it's hard to say that he has less of a threat as the second running back, with Raheem Mostert scoring 20 touchdowns last season, but 32-year-old back, is that really going to, maybe it does. I mean, he didn't start getting significant touches until he was like 26, 27 years old, right? So maybe he will continue to hold up and be that fountain of youth. But otherwise, like, the situation in terms of the offense, we like both of the offense. We probably like the play callers a little bit better in Miami. And I definitely think the competition is a little bit lesser than in Detroit. So to me, I don't see a whole bunch of difference between Achane and Gibbs. And if I can get basically a first as a discount between those 2 players, like, I'm absolutely going to be attacking Achane over Gibbs at those prices.
Yeah, I think at cost, to me, it's not a question. I love Achane at cost compared to Gibbs. I think for me, there's 2 differences between Gibbs and Achane, and they're basically nothing to do with either of the players. I think the difference for Gibbs is the offensive line. The Lions have got arguably the best offensive line in the league. The Dolphins have, on paper, got maybe the worst, and we're going to coach that up. We're going to scheme around that, but let's not hide from it. They were a bad offensive line last year, and they've lost arguably their best offensive lineman in free agency. So I think that's a massive difference when you're talking about the Lions, who have got probably the best right tackle in the league, an elite left tackle, an elite center, and competent guards. Like, it's a world difference there. And I also think, maybe I'm getting a little bit too into the weeds here, there's a difference between Jared Goff playing under center and Tua under center, in terms of Tua has a very quick time to throw, with the whole offense is built around his ability to process pre-snap and get the ball out at an insanely quick level. He throws I don't have numbers in front of me, but a really high percentage of first read throws. Whereas
Sure.
Jared Goff, I think where he took a step from the Rams to when he came across to the Lions was his willingness and ability to sit in the pocket and take a hit. And I think that you'll see Jared Goff is so much better at going 1 to 2 to 3 check down, whereas Tua kind of goes 1 to 2, get rid of the ball, and he doesn't progress. And yes, there will absolutely be first read throws for the running back in both offenses, but you tend to see the running back being further down the progression and more likely to be a check down option than necessarily the first read in the passing offense. So I think in a Jared Goff led Lions offense where he's going to be more efficient behind a better offensive line, but also Jared Goff's going to have more time to get through those reads, and then he can check down to Jahmyr Gibbs. Whilst there's still two elite options in the offense, I think I could see Jahmyr Gibbs commanding decent target volume. I worry that Achane isn't going to get those opportunities because Tua either doesn't progress through his reads or doesn't have the time to progress through his reads to check it down to the running back. And, in an offense where, Tyreek Hill saw 170 targets last year. Jalen Waddle's probably going to see an increase in his 100 that he saw last year. Is there going to be enough to see Devon Achane take a step up in that receiving game? And that's my concern. So if I'm talking pure cost, I would absolutely take, Achane on the first over Gibbs. But in terms of straight up, I think there is a significant gap in terms of that situation and potential usage. Whilst I get your point of they're similar sized players, they're probably just likely to be just as injury potential for either of them.
Yeah, the dump off opportunities is definitely a good point and one I didn't really think about. So I'll have to figure that into my my thinking going forward. I just think, you're certainly betting on efficiency with Achane more than Gibbs. As good as the weapons are in Detroit, they're not Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, right? Outside of St. Brown, you say we can prop up Laporta all we want, but in terms of like the receiver position, like there's just no comparison between those two. So there's going to be more fighting for opportunities there. That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess there's potential concern. Tua is still not signed a contract extension, is he? So who is going to be under center moving forward for the Dolphins? I think that's potentially a question mark. The next guy we're going to talk about, though, it feels like he has gone through the full dynasty life cycle of value over the last 12 months. He was kind of slightly unheralded as a draft pick. Some people fell in love with him on his efficiency and the touches that he did get while sharing an offense with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry then moves on, and Tyjae Spears is the biggest buy in Dynasty. And then they go out and spend an awful lot of money on Tony Pollard in free agency. And he's kind of left in this limbo. Are you a person that thinks the flashes we saw last year are enough that we could potentially see a competent season from him this year?
Yeah, I think so. I just think that I know Tony Pollard got the contract, but it seems like if Tony Pollard couldn't produce in the most ideal situation of any running back last season, it's just not going to happen on a Titans team, with a lesser offense, I would argue, especially with the uncertainty quarterback with Will Levis. How are they going to move the ball? We've seen reports of Tony Pollard also moving around the formation a little bit, being more involved in the passing game, but we already know that's a strength of Spears. So I do think we need to pump the brakes a little bit on Spears is going to completely overtake Pollard and completely own that backfield. I don't think that's going to happen, but we saw the efficiency from Spears last year, able to be productive behind an all-timer in Derrick Henry. And I think Derrick Henry, even at this advanced age, is more of a threat to touches from any other running back on a roster than Tony Pollard would be. So this is a really tough one. I actually have them ranked back to back in my rankings, 27 and 28. And that's really just a hedge because I just don't know. I think whichever one does emerge, if one does, maybe less so from Pollard because of the age. But if Spears were to emerge, then he's going to rocket up certainly my rankings from the late 20s, probably to at least the early 20s, if not the high to mid teens. Right. So it's just a weird situation for him. How are they going to deploy these two backs? It seems like it's going to be a complete 50-50 split. And if that's the case, I think Spears is going to be fine, but he's not going to be that, league winning kind of asset that we maybe hoped he was once Henry moved on.
Yeah, it's such a weird one, isn't it? Because normally when we see these backfields, we just got finished talking about David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, and it's like, yeah, you can absolutely see their roles in the NFL offense. Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard are such similar players. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, so we've got two backs that are very similar. How's this going to shake out? And it's, I want to know who's going to be the passing downs back, who's going to get the goal line touches, and essentially those high value touches, who's going to get those?
Yep.
And at the moment, it's a complete toss up, because if you said to me they saw similar usage, but Tyjae Spears sees, more third down and passing down work and more goal line touches, well, he's going to be the one you want to own in fantasy. But if it's the other, it could be Tony Pollard. So yeah, it's tough for me. I'd lean straight up Tony Pollard over Tyjae Spears, just because I think they already had Spears. They went out and acquired Pollard. And I think that if they truly believed in Spears, I don't know if you go out and buy a player that's essentially the exact same profile. Maybe I'm kind of galaxy braining it and overthinking it a bit, but I just it worries me that it's potentially a new regime. You go out and acquire a running back, you don't necessarily have anything left in for the old running back. But I mean, in terms of price, he's going as RB29 in ADP. You can go out and buy him for a second. Is that something you're looking to do if you're looking for that kind of boom bust potential option, or would you rather pivot to, let's say, one of the veterans that's probably in a similar price range, whether it be a Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, someone like that?
I think it just depends. It's one of those, everything in Dynasty it depends, right? I think it's one of those, depends on the roster construction. I think a second is a completely fair price for Spears, but if I'm a strong contender, maybe I would rather go out and pay a second for Josh Jacobs, who I'm not massively a fan of. I think that Lloyd is going to mess up his ideal situation there in Green Bay this year, but certainly feels a little bit better as a contender, right? And if not that, then maybe I want to pivot down a little bit. I can get Bijan Robinson, who's at running back 35. Spears, sorry, that's my rankings. I don't have the ADP pulled up, but is going a little bit later, I believe. So if you really want that like locked in kind of workhorse role, so. But if I'm, if I'm a middle of the pack, I'm looking for like a spark plug. I think that Tyjae Spears fits that role. I think if I'm a complete tank jog team looking forward to 2025, maybe I'm willing to hold on to that pick and not pay that price. But I think a mid second is totally a fine price for Spears if you'd like to speculate. And it's just always a question of what else can you get for that. And where is my team at right now? Like, can I get something, like you said, can I get a more comfortable piece for that second round pick if I am a contender?
Yeah. I think that's it, isn't it? I quite like the price. I quite like the price if I'm on a, coming out of a rebuild. I'm not quite that true contender that can probably push for a title, but actually I want to start building my running back room out. That's probably quite barren. Yeah, I quite like the kind of lottery ticket of Tyjae Spears, because let's be honest, by the middle of the season, I feel like you're going to know one way or the other. By week 8, you're going to know Tyjae Spears probably either going to be worth a first plus or a third. And I'm not sure there's necessarily a world in between where he's worth a second again.
And there's a lot of contingency upside there too, right? Like if Pollard goes down, like there's nothing behind those guys. It's Hassan Haskins, who's coming off a major injury, Julius Chestnut, who I know some people like quite a bit. Matt Wallman really likes Dylan Johnson, the rookie this season. But honestly, if something were to happen to Pollard again, and that offense is as good as some people think it might be with those two receivers and Will Levis maybe taking a step forward. And then you're going to have, I think then that's when you reach that first plus range for Spears. I do think we were there before the Tony Pollard signing. I think I saw him move for like kind of a late first range multiple times throughout in my leagues. And those people are probably regretting it now. But there's still hope. It's not fun to root for an injury, but if you have Spears and something were to happen to Pollard, it's going to be incredible, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's he was probably one of the biggest losers in free agency, let's be honest, because there was a significant drop as soon as Tony Pollard signed, because I'm not sure many people expected them to go out and spend the money that they did, bringing in a running back. The final guy we're going to talk about, though, I feel disappointed because I was so excited last year about what Zach Charbonnet was going to be. I thought he was going to be the perfect, solid, reliable, what you're going to get out of him. And I thought the Seahawks were going to love him rather than the boom-bust nature of Kenneth Walker. and he just never really got the volume that you'd expect. I think used in the passing game more than I thought he would, but only 108 rushing attempts throughout the season. Just felt slightly disappointed. Came in as the RB45. Were you a Charbonnet believer, Matt, or were you expecting basically what happened last year?
No, I expected more for sure. I really, I don't know if it was a narrative or whatever, but I really bought into the fact that, the coaching staff saw what Kenneth Walker was in his rookie season, and it was a boom bust kind of nature. Like it was, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I think he had a very large, if not the largest percentage of runs his rookie season that actually went for negative yards. Is just inefficient on a touch per touch basis. But then he would break off those long 30, 40 yard runs for touchdowns. And it seemed like that frustrated the coaching staff a little bit. They wanted somebody who was a little bit more consistent that they could rely on to get the short yardage stuff. And that Charbonnet was a much better pass catcher, I think, than Kenneth Walker, at least in terms of demonstrated ability. So yeah, it was a bit of a disappointment. But I mean, I have him down at running back 24, much farther off than those top guys, and I don't necessarily think that after Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs went in last year's running back class, like there wasn't like a massive gap between the next guy and Charbonnet, right? So he has been somebody that, especially in underdog drafts this offseason, I've been hitting the draft button on it, going in like the 130 range, I think 120s, 130s range. The last time I looked. So like at that price tag for season or for redraft leagues, I absolutely like taking that again because of the contingency upside. We have a new coaching staff. We don't know which one of these guys that they're going to favor. So I think there's hope. I do think that Walker is going to be the first recipient of that, but I'm not sure the gap between those two is as big as we're seeing in ADP right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't get the opportunity to draft an underdog. We mere mortals have to live with DraftKings over here. But yeah, he's someone that I'm hitting an awful lot in that, as Tom would call it, the running back glory hole zone, where you're getting those fantastic values in that sort of early 100 picks. I think he's a great pick for this year. And as you said, about Tyjae Spears, he's got that contingent upside where if there is a Walker injury, Charbonnet could potentially be a league winner this year. I expect the Seahawks to utilize him more. I think this offense is going to become slightly more run heavy. I think, it feels like it's a trope, but anytime you bring a defensive head coach in, you automatically feel like they're going to lean slightly more towards the run.
Yeah,
I think that, Kenneth Walker, his rookie year, he was the lowest in success rate. He didn't have a good year last year in terms of success rate. And I think that there's only so many times you can be 3rd and 9 and relying on him breaking one in order to get a first down. Whereas, coaches are going to say, right, give me the guaranteed 4 yards from Zach Charbonnet every time kind of thing. So, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. I don't think it's going to happen, but I wouldn't be shocked if this ended up being a 60-40 backfield in Charbonnet's favor by the end of the year. I think if I had to put money on it, I'd probably still bet on Walker leading it. But I think Charbonnet's definitely going to see more volume this year than he did last year.
And we're collecting July ADP data right now, so we don't have that. But in June, he's going 74 spots after Kenneth Walker, which
is mad.
Makes absolutely zero chance. RB10 versus RB35. So yeah, there's a significant discount there. Pass on Kenneth Walker in the early 4th, late 3rd round, and draft Zach Charbonnet in the 10th round.
Yeah. Well, there you go. We've walked through the 5 sophomore running backs. So Matt, whilst we're here, I've got a question for you. Let's walk through the prices. So you've got Bijan for 2 firsts and 2 seconds, Jahmyr Gibbs for 2 firsts and a second, Devon Achane for a first and 2 seconds, or a second for Tyjae Spears or Zach Charbonnet. At those costs, which one are you going out to buy?
It's Achane, man. It's Devon Achane.
Yeah. Though I've
seen him move. I've seen him move for a first and a second. Like I'm happily willing to pay that price, absolutely. And I think I could probably get myself to 2 firsts if I was in a position where I just wanted that, that guy that could give me a 40-50 point week. There's not a ton of those guys, especially at the running back position, right? There's CMC, of course, and then Maybe we'll get that out of Bijan this season. I think Breece Hall can get there. Gibbs can get there. Maybe Taylor with a multi-touchdown game. But outside of that, like, to me, it's Achane as the next likely guy and probably the most cheapest access to that kind of production on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I think if you need to embrace risk, if you need to, tip those scales in your favor and embrace that potential upside, it's got to be him at that cost, because I think he's got the potential of those elite guys at half the price, and it's certainly worthwhile taking the flyer. But thank you so much for jumping on, Matt. Remind everybody who is watching, where can they find you? Where can they find your work?
Yeah, please find all my stuff over at dynastyleaguefootball.com, with the DLF Dynasty podcast. Gets recorded every week with myself, Dan Myler, and Ryan McDowell. And sometimes we do Dynasty game night, but it's been a while. We've all been pretty busy with SFB setup and Eliminator setup and stuff like that. But we hope to get some more game show episodes out for you guys soon.
Awesome. Well, go and check out his work. It is fantastic. Thank you ever so much for joining us. We will be back very soon to round out the Sophomore Scrutiny series. And if you're wanting some more redraft, best ball stuff, stick around, because we've got plenty more coming to the channel.